Hi, in this lesson we are going to see about network adapters in VirtualBox. So first we'll be seeing what are different types of network adapters that we can actually configure in a VirtualBox virtual machine. Then we're going to see how to use which adapter for which type of product. Let's say for example, how many adapters I have to use if I'm using Oracle Rack and which type of adapters I have to use if I'm going to run Oracle Rack in my virtual machines. And if I want to configure database, if you want to run Oracle database, if you want to run Oracle eBusiness Suite, what type of adapters do I have to use? So all these details we're going to see in this lesson. First, let us try to understand what are different important network adapters. Remember, there are more than 4 to 5 network adapters actually, but if you're a DBA and if you're listening to this specific video, then you definitely would not require more than these 3 adapters. And not only that, your DBA, for generally any other IT professional who is using VirtualBox, you generally do not need more than these 3 adapters. So first, let us try to understand what is the NAT adapter. So NAT basically stands for Network Address Translation. But remember, before we understand the concept of NAT, NAT is the default network adapter that is there in the VirtualBox VMs. So if you do not change the default network configuration of your VirtualBox VMs, or if you do not add any additional network adapters, NAT adapter is the default network adapter that is there in VirtualBox. Now, so what exactly is use of NAT adapter? Whenever you actually create the virtual machine, if you have a NAT adapter that is mainly used for the access of internet. Let's say for example, this is my Windows system and I've created now a new virtual machine with a NAT adapter. The moment you create a virtual machine with NAT adapter, if your Windows is having access to the internet, then that also means that your VM has also access to the internet. So to summarize the importance of NAT adapters, even if you have, let's say for example, 10 VMs and all the 10 VMs you want to actually have access to internet, you just need to make sure you have the NAT adapter that is actually available for these virtual machines. So NAT adapter is basically for internet. Now, what is the concept of NAT exactly? The NAT is nothing but it's like a router. So let's say for example at home we have actually a Wi-Fi router and all the devices which are actually connecting to this specific Wi-Fi router will get the access to the internet automatically. So though the IPs, for example, IP of this can be for example 10.0.1.1 and this can be 1.2 and this can be 1.3, whatever is the IP of this specific device, for example, all the devices will still be able to access the internet because the NAT by default, the router basically works as NAT, does the network address translation. Whatever is basically the IP of all the devices that are connected to your Wi-Fi router at home will be able to actually translate this specific IP and make the internet access available for all the devices that are connected to the router. The same way, how many irrespective of whatever VMs you actually create on this uh, host system using a NAT adapter, all of the VMs will be still able to access the internet. So usually what my recommendation is, let's say for example, I'm going to install Oracle Linux virtual machine. And so when I create the Oracle Linux virtual machine, I need to have internet. So make sure that you need to have at least one NAT adapter and you can also configure multiple adapters, but at least having one NAT adapter will make sure that you'll always have the access to the internet. And when I have virtual uh, Oracle Linux VM and I want to run any yum command, for example, to install any RPM, I want to install, for example, pre-install RPM of Oracle database. When I want to run yum command, I need to have access to the internet. So my recommendation is no matter whatever is the product you're going to install in this VirtualBox VM, make sure that you have at least one NAT adapter for each and every virtual machine. Now let us try to understand what is the bridged adapter. As the name suggests, bridged adapter means basically this adapter will work as a bridge between your VM and the network that it is actually the network that your host is actually connected to. What does it mean exactly? Now let us say for example, I have my Windows host. Let's say it can be your desktop, laptop or server or anything where you have your VirtualBox installed. Now I'm going to create one virtual machine and I'm going to have one network adapter, let's say for example, which is a bridge network adapter. The moment you actually create the bridge network adapter, what it does basically is it will use the same physical network adapter that is actually present in your host. So it does not create any new virtual network interface. It simply uses the existing network interface that is already there in your laptop or desktop. Let's say for example, I have a laptop or I have a desktop. Every device, every computing device such as laptop or desktop will definitely have a network interface. And this specific network interface or network card basically will be used by the bridge adapter to access the network. Now let's say for example, I've got one more laptop which is using the same network. I have one more desktop which is using the same network. Then the moment you actually use bridge adapter, what it does basically is it appears as a new machine which joined the network. So which means all the systems that are there in the network can now access this new VM automatically because all of them now are part of one network like a public network actually. So now, when do you use it? When you usually have more than one systems and you want all of them to be able to access this specific VM, the moment you keep the bridge network, whatever this Windows system, whatever network access this Windows system has, this VM will also get automatically. That is why it's called the bridge adapter. So in bridge adapter, remember, it does not create any new virtual network interface. It will simply use the existing physical interface, that is physical network interface that is already present in your host system. Now let us try to understand the concept of host only adapters. So what is a host only adapter? As the name says, remember when you use the host only adapter on a virtual machine, it can access only that specific host on which this virtual machine is actually running. So in other words, actually, in the previous example, we have seen that if you use bridge adapter, if this specific host system, Windows system can access another 3 or 4 laptops or desktops, and all of them have different IPs, for example, these laptops or desktops can also access this VM directly through network, and also this VM can also access these laptops and desktops directly. But on the contrary, when you use host only adapter, let's say for example, I've got my Windows system and I'm actually running VirtualBox here and I've created a new VM with host only adapter. The moment you actually create host only adapter first, actually, so remember always before you select this option called host only adapter, you need to create one host only adapter actually first, host only network interface first on your VirtualBox. Then only you can use this specific interface in your virtual machine. We'll see that example right now. So what happens basically is whenever you create a new host only network interface on your VirtualBox, it will create a virtual network interface. So which means it will not use the existing network interface or network card that is already there in your Windows. So it will create a new virtual network interface. Obviously, because it's a new virtual network interface, the virtual machine will communicate with your Windows and Windows will communicate with the virtual machine with the help of this new virtual network interface which we have created. So obviously, if I have, let's say for example, another two systems which are connected to the actual network of your Windows, all these systems will be able to connect to Windows, but they cannot access VM because this VM works on a separate network interface, which is the host only interface. So now let us see what happens when we actually create a host only interface. So here you can see that these are all the network interfaces which I actually have in my system. Now there are different network adapters which are enabled and which are disabled. Our point here is now let us try to create a new host only network adapter first, and this host only network interface, once we create it, we should be able to see a virtual network actually interface here. So let us try to create it. So I've come to my VirtualBox. I'll go to File and you can see something called Host Network Manager. Here you can see create option. The moment you click on create, it will create a new network interface. Now this new network interface, let's say for example, the name of it is VirtualBox host only Ethernet adapter 2. So the moment you create this, let us see if we can see a new adapter here. You can see the names of these adapters. Here you can see VirtualBox host only Ethernet adapter 1, 2, and 3. And also in the VirtualBox, we have already seen that we have basically, one second, host network manager. We have got 3 of the adapters. Now let us see the IP addresses of these adapters. The network adapter which we have created right now is actually 186.1. And when we go to the existing network connections that are there and right click on this specific properties, and if you go to IPv4 address, you can see it is 192.168.186.1, which means the communication between my Windows and this specific any VirtualBox which I create with this Ethernet adapter will be done using this specific virtual host only Ethernet adapter. So let's say for example you take the virtual machine here which is having two network interfaces here as you can see. So go to settings, and if you go to network, I have two adapters for this specific virtual machine. One adapter is NAT adapter for internet and the second one is host only adapter, and I'm using VirtualBox host only Ethernet adapter 4. So this VirtualBox host only Ethernet adapter 4 is the adapter that is used for any communication between my VirtualBox VM and the host system. And if you see this specific adapter number like hash 4 for example, and go to the details of this specific adapter, you can see the IP is 192.168.56.1. So any virtual machine you're going to create with this adapter, you can specify the IPs based on this specific IP address 192.168.56.x. You can give 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and based on whatever requirement it is. So this is the difference between the host only adapter and bridge adapter and NAT adapter. Now the important point we need to understand here is what is the difference, exact difference between the host only adapter and bridge adapter. We already discussed at that point that if you want to access all the public network devices that are actually connected to your host system, then use bridge network. Or if you want multiple devices connected to your same network to access your VM, then you use bridge network adapter. But on the other side, if you want to have a private network wherein you want only the communication to happen between your host and the virtual machine, then you can actually choose host only adapter. But what if I'm having just a laptop and in my laptop I'm just creating all virtual machines? I don't have any other systems which are there in the network. I have only one laptop or one desktop or one server and I want to create virtual machines in it. In that case, you won't find any difference between the host only adapter or the bridge adapter. There is no difference because there is no other systems that are actually connected to this network and nobody else is going to actually access these systems. In that case, you won't find much of a difference. But remember always, if you have more than one VMs that are there and you want to communicate from one VM to another VM, then either all of them should be bridge adapters or same host adapter. Let's say for example, I have host only adapter hash 2, host only adapter 4 for example. I'm going to use hash 2 here and I'm going to use hash 4 here, then obviously these two cannot communicate with each other. So in case of bridge adapter, obviously because we are not going to differentiate, all of them will be able to communicate with each other. That is why in rack systems actually, as you know in rack, we have two types of interfaces. One is public network and the second is private network. So for public network, you can use bridge adapter, and for private network, you can use host only adapter. And this is how we can actually decide what type of adapter we have to use for which type of product. Now, I've given a brief example of what type of adapters can be used actually for which type of product. Let's say, for example, I've got a virtual machine and I'm going to install Oracle database. Then what I'll do is I'll just configure one adapter for host only or bridge adapter and one adapter for NAT. so that I'll have internet access at the same time using PuTTY or MobiXterm. I can connect from my host Windows to my virtual machine using one of the adapters, host only or bridged adapter. The same works with any other product of Oracle, let's say Enterprise Manager or EBS or Fusion Middleware like WebLogic, for example. I can follow the same methodology for all other products. But for rack, actually, the main difference is since it's going to have multiple networks, we have to ensure we have one network for public and one network for the private. Since we know already that private network is primarily the host only network, always use host only network for the private network. And for the public network, actually you can actually use either host only or bridge adapter. But in this case of rack, the interface which you are using for host only of public and private should be different in case of rack. Let's say I'm using, for example, host only network adapter 4 for the public network, then use host only network adapter 2 for example private, so that they do not communicate with each other. As you know, in Oracle rack, the private network interface, the private network that is there in Oracle rack is only for the communication between the nodes, that is internode or inter-instance communication. Now, which also means, let's say for example, I'm going to have another database which wants to connect to this rack database using a DB link, for example, or this is basically a rack database which is used by EBS. In this case, make sure that all of these systems which are connected to this rack database will be using the hash 4 host only adapter. Or if you want to just make it simple, instead of creating any other adapters, for all public network, you can simply create the bridge adapter so that you need not manually mention any other adapter, like a specific number adapter or anything. So you can simply use a bridge adapter so that all of them can communicate with each other for the public network. And for the private network, actually you can create a separate host only network interface. What I usually follow is I have a different network interface for different host only network adapter for a public network and different host only network adapter for private. So depending on the product, I actually decide what type of adapter I have to use. And finally, last but not the least, even for Oracle Rack, when you want to install any RPMs, we would require internet. And to access internet, we're going to have NAT network. So this is how you can decide how many network interfaces you need really in your system, that is in your virtual machine, and what is the significance of each and every type of network adapters. Thank you for listening to us.